Last week, Senator JD Vance, Republican of Ohio, and the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party, Donald Trump's running mate, seen here demolishing his opponent, Governor Walz. That was really something. And I have incontrovertible evidence that he won, overwhelmingly so. Want to see it? Not a word about his performance yesterday in the Sunday shows. This became the somehow oldest news story. The mainstream media moved on very, very quickly. That's pretty convincing proof for me that he won. I also got to know this. I think Senator Vance knew he was winning every step of the way. Remember that? Remember that moment? Those moments, I should say. Senator Vance, welcome to Newsmax, and lots to talk about. Great to see you. What were you thinking during those moments?
Well, honestly, Greg, you're so nervous. You're just trying to say something that isn't too dumb and doesn't embarrass your running mate. I definitely think we were able to get some good shots in. And the strategy that I took, Greg, going into it was I wanted to prosecute the case against Kamala Harris because, you know, whatever Tim Walz's views are on the topic of the day, it doesn't matter. Kamala Harris is the one who's actually at the top of the ticket. And she's the one who's run from her record every single step of the way, from banning fracking to defunding the police to opening the southern border. She has flipped on every single one of her major policy views over the last 3.5 years because she knows that Donald Trump's policies and record were popular and hers is unpopular. So she's trying to run away from her own record as quickly as possible. I just wanted to tie her to the truth, tie her to reality. And the moment, Greg, when I realized things had gone very well, is that when I saw my wife right after the debate, her face just lit up. She can't lie to me. It's one of her great character traits is that she just is impossibly truthful about everything. And, she definitely made it obvious to me when I saw her that she thought I had done well, and that's how I knew things had gone well.
Well, it was really something to witness, and I saw her come up to you afterwards. I was wondering what you guys were talking about. Today is October 7th. 1 year ago, Hamas, that horrific strike on Israel. Please, anything you'd like to share your thoughts about today? And can you explain, I do believe this, that this would not have happened if President Trump had been president on that day?
Yeah, Greg, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it just shows how weakness invites chaos and death and destruction. And unfortunately, we've got a lot of that across the world because Kamala Harris's veiled leadership has led to a lot of innocent people being slaughtered, a lot of wars started that would not have otherwise started. And on October the 7th, I mean, a year after this terrible attack, I think the thing that I'm thinking most about today is that we still have Americans who are being held hostage by Hamas. I mean, obviously, our hearts go out to the over 1,000 Israelis who lost their lives. But can you imagine any time in American history where you would have hostages kept by a foreign terrorist organization and the president and vice president of the United States act as if nothing had happened? You so rarely hear about these innocent people who have been living in a literal hellscape for the last year. And unfortunately, Vice President Kamala Harris seems not to care about it. When Donald Trump is president, I guarantee people are not going to be taking Americans' innocence hostage for a year with no consequences. We have got to get those people home. They deserve to be where they belong, not being terrorized by this brutal terrorist organization.
Senator Vance, you speak about God often and very, very powerfully. You did so at the Butler rally this weekend, and it was really something. I'd like to ask you about it. Go ahead and roll that tape, please.
Now, I believe, as sure as I'm standing here today, that what happened was a true miracle. And on that day, America felt the truth of Scripture. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I truly believe that God saved President Trump's life that day. And I believe that God is with us right now and watches over this incredible nation every single day.
Senator Vance, that is not radical talk. That is beautiful. It's faith-driven, and it's kind of part of our tradition. They try to use it as a weapon against you, your faith. And I hear about Christian nationalism, which I've never heard of until liberals started talking about it. Have you noticed that?
I've heard they talk about that phrase a lot, Greg, but I think I was saying something that a lot of Americans believe, which is that God saved Donald Trump's life that day. I mean, we've all seen the clip and the footage where he turned his head just a little bit at the last second. And if he hadn't done that, he would not be standing here today. He would not be running for president, and I believe ready to win this election. And I think for a lot of us, what I take from that is that God still very much has a plan for this nation. He still cares about and directs the affairs of men. As you said, this is something that was conventional wisdom in this country for over 200 years, Democrats and Republicans. While we admit that we don't always know what God wants us to do, we're not always sure exactly what God's plan is for us. We appeal to God, recognizing that He cares about each and every single one of us, and He has a plan for this nation. And so I take inspiration from that. I take a certain humility from that I don't always know what God's plan is, but I try to walk the path that He's set as much as possible. That's not radical, I think, to 90% of Americans, Greg. That's just common sense.
And, you know, I love this about you and about America. Last year, actually in 2023, you were not yet a U.S. Senator. You were a Senator-elect. I think we have you being sworn in by Kamala Harris, of all people. Your life has changed radically and probably unbelievably in 3 months. What is that like? I mean, a couple of months ago, you were probably able to walk down the street in a lot of cities in America, and people would not know who you are. Now you are basically household name famous. What has that been like?
Well, Greg, you're right. My life has definitely changed a great deal. I don't drive a car anymore. That's probably the biggest change for me, is I always like to drive, and now I've got Secret Service agents that drive me around everywhere. But, man, I just try to enjoy every single minute of this. What an honor it is to have come from my background, you know, grew up in a working-class family, raised by my grandmother, and now to be going all over the country asking the American people to make me their next vice president. I think it's a testament to how great this country is. But for me personally, I just try to enjoy the ride. You know, my kids are seeing the country in a totally different way. You know, my wife and I are traveling around together most days, and of course that's a real blessing for the two of us to be able to do this together as a team. So I enjoy it, and I remember what an awesome responsibility it is, because we're not just trying to win this election, Greg. We're really trying to give the American people the kind of government that they deserve. We're trying to, you know, make life more affordable. We're trying to close down that border. We're trying to make the government actually work for American citizens once again. I don't take that lightly. And I just try to remind myself every single day that it's a great blessing to be able to do what I do.
A couple of more quick things, if you don't mind. Are you satisfied? Has FEMA gotten the message? Probably not. They can't in such short order. Look, a lot of us are concerned that they're being unfair with Western North Carolina for maybe political causes. David Axelrod seems to be kind of gleeful that maybe some people in red counties might have trouble voting. How frustrated or confident are you right now in what's happening in Western North Carolina?
Well, Greg, look, I'm extremely frustrated. I think, first of all, it's a matter of focus. You have FEMA, which is there for disaster relief for American citizens after a terrible storm, being deployed repeatedly to deal with Kamala Harris's wide-open border and the migrant invasion that it's caused. That lack of focus on their core mission, that distraction, and focusing instead on illegal immigrants, I guarantee that it has made the disaster response worse. But I actually think the biggest failure is from the political leadership, Greg. When you have something like this happen, you have so many bureaucratic organizations, you need leadership to cut through the red tape, to send the military to where it needs to go, to tell FAA that they need to do everything, that's the Federal Aviation Administration, that they can to get supplies in as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, when this disaster struck, Joe Biden was on a beach where he stayed for a couple of days. Kamala Harris was at a San Francisco fundraiser. The lack of leadership is why I think you have this bureaucratic incompetence, and a lot of Americans are suffering, Greg. Every single day, there are still Americans in Western North Carolina, all across Appalachia. They're not getting the help that they need because their government is failing them. And I promise you that when Donald Trump is president, you're going to have a president every single day who fights for American citizens, whatever walk of life they come from, whatever their skin color or their background. Donald Trump appreciates more than anybody that his job is to look after the American people, and that's what's going to happen when he's president.
JD Vance, we're going to say goodbye in a moment. If I may offer an observation, I know they try to put you on the defensive. Oh, you texted something about Donald Trump 7 years ago. You weren't always on board. I think that could be a huge advantage because Americans are bathed in like electronic dishonesty about Donald Trump all the time. And like your experience, you were kind of one of them and going about your business. Was there a moment when you realized, one in particular, like, you know what, the fake news has been wrong about this guy all the time. I've been lied to.
You know, there wasn't one moment, Greg. I mean, I thought Donald Trump was a very good president, and that's what ultimately caused me to change my mind on him. But I think in particular, what happened after Charlottesville, where they accused Donald Trump of defending the killer and calling, remember the media said that he called the killer positive names. He, of course, never did that. And when I actually looked at what the president said, where he condemned the violence at Charlottesville, I realized that so much of what the media says about him is such an unbelievable lie. And so, you know, if you're an American citizen out there, you maybe don't agree with everything that Donald Trump says. You maybe believe some of the things that the media has said about him. I guess my message to you would be, I'd invite you to do what I did, which is look at his record. Look at rising take-home pay, a secure southern border, the fact that inflation was low, and ask yourself, does the media lie to you about Donald Trump because they care about you, or do they lie about Donald Trump because they're terrified that he's a bigger threat to their power than anything that's happened in this country's politics in a very long time? I truly believe, and I've gotten to know the man, of course, very well personally, so it's a little bit easier for me to say it, but I really believe that he wakes up wanting to make the country more prosperous and wanting to make the world a more peaceful place. That's who you want as president of the United States, is somebody who sacrifices to lead the country, not somebody who's enriched by their leadership of this country. And Donald Trump, I think, has sacrificed more for the United States of America than any president, at least in my lifetime. It speaks very highly of him, but more importantly, it says what kind of a president he is going to be if the American people entrust him with the presidency again. I'd encourage him to do it. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to say you were wrong about him in 2016 or 2020. I did it. I changed my mind, and I'd encourage Americans to do that because he's actually got the plan to make this country better off.
JD Vance. By the way, the JD stands for, if you don't mind?
James David.
James David. And has anybody ever told you that you'd be the first vice president in maybe a century to have a beard and or any kind of facial hair? I believe that's true. You got to go back to 19.
Well, I like the great Ohioan Ulysses S. Grant had a beard, Greg. So if I'm half the public leader that he was, then I'll take that as a compliment.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Senator Vance. Good luck. Stay safe on the campaign trail. And we hope to see you again.
Thanks, Greg. Take care.